Interest centres on Essendon forward Deadshot Coleman. Can he kick his 100th goal for the season, his first in big football? Coleman gets it, and there's the 100. It's Essendon by 73 points.
And now here's the fare of the game, kicked by Essendon's champion full forward John Coleman. Number 10, leading goal kicker for season 1950, with a grand total of 120 goals for the season.
Purity as a sportsman, as the champion player, his meaning to Essendon as a dual premiership coach, and the fact that he was just the epitome of what you would say is the James Hird of today. He was of that era and so admired by so many, and those of us who were around with him by and large think the sun, moon, stars and everything else shone from him.
I was 9 years old, barracking for Essendon, lived in Essendon, and Coleman, 5 goals in his first quarter of VFL football. Amazing. And then he went on to kick 12 that day and became a superstar overnight. It was a wonderful start to a great career.
The day he kicked 12 goals, I had to have an Essendon jumper with number 10 on, and I just idolised him like a lot of people did. And when you look at his first season, it was just great record, and I don't know whether anyone today can hold that record, because he kicked 12 goals in his first game. He won the club's best and fairest. He won the leading goal kicker in the VFL and played in the premiership. So it wasn't a bad start for his first season with Essendon.
Here's Coleman at his brilliant best. Yes, he takes a fine mark there with some clever juggling.
You talk to people, in their 20s and that, they've all heard of Dick Reynolds and John Coleman and Bill Hutchison. They were the 3 standouts when I was playing, and they'll never be forgotten, those 3. And John Coleman's well up with Dick Reynolds and Hutchie. They were 3 great footballers.
To come into a club and stamp the authority the way he did, he certainly left his legacy at the club, the Essendon Football Club, and would have loved to have witnessed him playing.
He was an explosive player. He had incredible acceleration, and the leap is still something that's a memorable part of his play, how he could virtually go straight upwards. Yes, he took a lot of marks riding on someone's back, but he also took so many really screaming high marks just by the sheer athleticism of his leap. And that was one of the keystones of his play.
John was a wonderful player. He was probably, in all my 65 years of barracking for Essendon and following AFL and VFL football, that he was the most exciting player I've seen. And there's been some wonderful players, but of course in all teams and in Essendon, but John would be the most exciting.
He had a beautiful pair of hands. Once the ball touched his hands, very much like Matty Lloyd. Matty Lloyd did that, and Matthew Lloyd reminded me a little bit of Coleman, the way he marked the ball, but just an ideal player to play in front of goals, because every time he went for the ball, he marked it and finished off kicking a goal.
When I started kicking a few goals, I would have a lot of the older generation come up to me and sort of not liken me to John Coleman, but say it's great to have another traditional full forward. And they used to tell me about the days at Windy Hill or other grounds, just switching ends just to follow John Coleman around. That's how exciting it was, whether it's his leap or his, the way he read the footy. And it often just had me imagining, I wish I saw John Coleman play. That's how highly everyone spoke of him.
It was an absolute tragedy that he'd started the season in 1954 so well and was marking these spectacular marks regularly, and then all of a sudden he's gone up for the ball and then crumpled on the ground as he's fallen, and didn't really ever recover from that. So it was a real blow for Essendon's premiership prospects, and a real blow to football in general, because people came from everywhere to see John Coleman. He was just such a spectacular mark and a spectacular player.
I can remember the hushed silence in the crowd as he lay on the ground. I can clearly remember he seemed to be separate from, not being smothered by other players. It was just one of those freak things that he landed badly and twisted his knee and I think it was a dislocation, but whatever it was, I'm sure today's medicos could fix it.
I think, obviously, with the Coleman medal, which I was fortunate enough to win, really the greatest goal kicker that ever played. It was just unfortunate that I think what might have been a 5 or 6 week knee injury, people say ended his career, because obviously the medical teams back then, there probably wasn't any, and he ended his career over it.
So many others of recent times have had far worse injuries. The medicos have been able to, with modern science, get them back on the track, but unfortunately it was a bit early for that with John, and the best of his play, I'm sure, we never ever saw.
You know, to sort of fight through adversity after doing a knee and coming back, but obviously in those times they couldn't fix him up, so which retired him, probably prematurely. And then, as we all know, he went on to coach and was quite successful in that field.
John, how do you feel about the result today? You're glad it's all over?
Well, I'm happy the season's over now that we've won, Lou, yes, by all means. And to win a premiership, well, that just is the climax to a season.
It must be a terrific strain to you this year, John. Like the side has had a lot of, not a lot of worry, but last year you came here and the side didn't go so well, and then again this year, well, OK, you should be very happy with the way they've played.
Yes, we've had our worries. The drawn game gave us extra worries, and then just prior to the game today, Jeff Leake, but everything's turned out satisfactorily.
Did you have any worries during the game today?
We're a young side fundamentally, and when Carlton got within a goal or 7 points, I was just wondering whether they would stay steady or panic a little bit. But they did steady, which shows that they have started to get that little bit of football know-how, and I think that was what counted.
As a coach, I thought he was just an unbelievable person. He had the ability to have fun with the blokes, and yet when he cracked the whip, he was the absolute ringmaster. He was the man in charge. He was a strict disciplinarian. He was a man who like his playing career, he was charismatic.
He sort of came and changed the whole concept, you know, the ideas. He brought his ideas in on training and playing days. He used to work out a lot of the opponent's weaknesses. He felt that that was one way of winning games. He'd have players' meetings on a Friday night.
Welded us together as a young team with these team meetings, which we held every Friday night before a match at his West Brunswick hotel. So that welded us together. We had some interesting tactical talks. Gave us great knowledge of the opposition and of some humorous moments too, of course, and that welded us very strongly as a team.
It was a real pleasure and honour in the first couple of years when I was on the bench quite often, listening to John Coleman give his verbal thoughts to the umpires as they went past. And he wasn't a friend of the umpires.
I always felt, and I always said to a lot of people, that John Coleman was way before his time, and if he was coaching today, he'd be brilliant.
Dick Reynolds and John Coleman and Bill Hutchison, they're legendary and they'll never be forgotten, and they were 3 champions. They only come around once a decade, but we were lucky to have 3 in the one decade.
People really looked up to him, and you talk to a lot of the older players, not only players but supporters that saw him in action, both on and off the field, talk highly of him, his competitive spirit, and which is what you need in a person, and you combine that with other great players what we've had in the club has made it a very successful period, and hopefully we can carry that legacy on into the future.
Just the impact he had, whether it was the 12 goals in his first game or 100 in his first year. I often look at the Essendon goal-kicking list, and there's myself, Simon Madden, and then Coleman in third, and he played for 4 or 5 years. So, probably the greatest football forward that this club's ever seen, and probably the game's ever seen.
His name will live forever as long as the club is going, and I'd like to see a nice bronze statue of John Coleman, particularly when they have the new venture at Tullamarine. You have a plaque outside against the wall of that action shot, which was typical of him. If that eventuates, I think it'll just show that how much the club think of the guy and the service he gave to the club.
like to sometimes think of the footy clubs as sort of a river, and Essendon is a powerful river in Australian rules footy. And a river is fed by tributaries to make it a powerful river. And I reckon that John Coleman was one of the most powerful tributaries to that greatness of Essendon. I'd say with Dick Reynolds, John would be really, those two are the icons of the Essendon Football Club and have helped tremendously to make it the club it is today.